Thank you. And can I just start by welcoming our new member of Dumfries and Galloway Council, Councillor Jackie McCammon, who won the by-election in Ward 2. Congratulations for that. You joining your first meeting is quite an exciting one. It's a part of the council's process, and I hope you enjoy your time with the council. Today I will be presenting the administration's budget for the council's consideration, but before we move on to that, we have some initial business to consider. And there are also 3 other groups who have submitted budget proposals for consideration today. So what I'm proposing to do is that I and the Deputy Leader will propose the administration budget. I'll then ask the Leader of the Conservative group to propose their budget and second their budget, then the Independent group, and then the Socialist group, and then we will have a discussion around the 4 budgets, which I would propose to take a bit of time for people to contribute, but not excessive amounts of time, because there's obviously a lot more to be discussed in March. Also on the agenda today is a report from the Section 95 officer, which provides a further update on a range of matters with regard to the local government finance settlement and our budget. So, Nick, can you provide the SEDERUNT and any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've had one apology from Councillor Drysdale, and members not present at the start of the meeting are Councillors Tate, Brodie and Giusti.
Leader, I can advise that certainly Tate and Giusti are apologies for today.
Apologies.
Yes, and I can advise that Councillor Brodie is an apology.
So therefore we have 39 members present.
Okay, thanks for that. Do any members have a declaration of interest they wish to make? Oh, Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Leader. I intend to make a declaration of interest in items 5 and 6. As you'll know, I am the resources spokesperson for COSLA. I've been negotiating the entire budget quantum on a national basis, but as we're discussing the specific distribution for Dumfries and Galloway, I intend to stay in for the budget debates.
Thanks. And then can we move to the minutes of the last meeting on the 17th of December? And can we approve those minutes? Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, it's on page 9, agenda item 6. There was a motion and amendment and they both read the same. I just want a bit of clarification on that.
Okay. 12. Well, there's one not, no, they're not the same. 14.1's not on. That was the £2 million from the redistribution of borrowing. And that was where there was a difference between ourselves and the Conservative group. So I think that's 14.1 is not included in 6.2.
Thanks, Leader.
Yeah, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, on the minute, on page 9, there was a motion and amendment, and it says there was 20 votes for the amendment, but by my counting, there's not 20 names underneath. So I don't know if there's a slight error there.
Yes.
I don't think it was a 23.
I don't think everybody
vote.
Was present. I don't think the entire council was
yes,
present.
I don't think that motion and amendment has actually got the right numbers next to it.
Happy to look into that, Chair. It's typographical in terms of if the number doesn't tally with the names listed. I think it's a simple mathematical glitch there.
Anything else on the minute? Well, with that correction, possibly, are we happy to approve the minute? Okay, thank you. Okay, can we move to item 4 on the council tax and community charges restrictions on voting? This is a procedural report presented in accordance with the provisions of the legislation, the Local Government Finance Act of 1992, which came into force with effect from the 6th of March of that year, and which may affect members' voting rights on council tax matters. It is a legal requirement that a member who is 2 or more months in arrear of council tax does not have voting rights in relation to fixing the council tax and requires to make a declaration to that effect. And Nick is here to assist members with any questions. So I'm assuming that there is no member present who is restricted in that manner. Okay? So we just are being asked to note the provisions of that because it doesn't affect anybody who's involved in the discussion. So if we move to item 5, the Budget and Council Tax 2020-21 and a report by the Head of Finance and Procurement. This report provides information to assist members in determining the Council's budget and the Council tax level for 2020-21 and the updated 10-year capital investment strategy. The report highlights that in setting the Council tax, we are required to do this based on an overall balanced budget for the financial year. And we have Paul Garrett and Gillian Ross here to speak to the report and answer any questions. Paul, do you want to say 1 or 2 words about recent developments?
Just briefly, Chair, the report makes reference to the potential for the Scottish Government's budget to be subject to change as it passes through the parliamentary process. As members will be aware, there was an indication yesterday of some movement that would lead to an increase in the local government finance settlement. We've had no formal notification of that yet. Stage 1 debates this afternoon and the final stage of the bill at the Scottish Parliament next Thursday. So obviously that will allow us to have the clear details to explain to members and set out in the report to full council when we come to the March meeting.
Thank you.
It's more a point just in regards to taking into consideration. We've seen the details. Paul's outlined it in writing as well. So we've seen that a potential uplift in nearly 3 million for this council if it comes to fruition. It's past experience would tell us that it will actually happen. Obviously, we'll have to see that final detail. So when it comes to the recommendations, should we be noting the fact that there's a potential uplift in these figures identified, not in front of us here, but in regards to the brief that we've had out with, because it may well affect the decision we're making in regards to our budget proposals.
Councillor Wilson?
I think it would be quite proper to note that it's subject to change and that, just to make provision for the fact that once we receive formal notification of any changes, that's communicated to all members.
And we will know, until it goes through stage 3, the budget bill is not actually passed. So we can't really take that into consideration today. But obviously, when we come to set the final budget at the end of March, we will have that information and we will have full detail of any changes to the indicative figures we were given previously. Okay, shall we move on to the main business, which is the debate around the budget proposals? We are setting council tax today under an unusual set of circumstances, brought about initially by decisions taken by the UK Parliament, and as a result we have had an indicative budget for 2021, but we do not yet know what our final revenue and capital allowances for 2020 and 21 will be. And stage 1 of the Scottish budget is taking place today, and it does appear that a deal has been struck which may include a further 95 million revenue for local government, and that may be worth 2.8 million for Dumfries and Galloway, but we do not yet have confirmation. And the other issue, I think, which is concerning, is there seems to have been no announcement on capital. And as we know, capital has been cut by 17%, so I think that is still a matter for concern for us. Over the past 10 years, Dumfries and Galloway council has had to bridge a funding gap which adds up to £106 million. This funding gap, estimated by finance officers for 2020-21, is currently 10.9 million, as reported in agenda item number 5. And even if we do get 2.8 million, that funding gap will still have been 8 million for this year. Previously agreed cuts and savings agreed in February and December last year have reduced the current gap that we're considering to 5.2 million. I was interested and encouraged to see that all 4 groups on this council have submitted budgets which propose 3% plus inflation, and that is a 4.84% rise in council tax. I'm sure none of us want to tax residents of Dumfries and Galloway unnecessarily. However, there was a strong message from the public during the budget consultations that people were prepared to pay increased council tax to avoid cuts to services. 41% stated that they favoured 3% plus inflation, and a further 11% were prepared to pay considerably more. 3 out of the 4 groups have chosen to use flexibility and the temporary use of non-recurring budget pressures funding to balance the revenue budget until we know what our final settlement is. The administration group, however, has included income generation proposals in the form of fees and charges and additional services, in addition to the council tax rise, meaning that all income generation measures would be set today. These additional income generation measures would bring in £222,000, and even if there is additional revenue coming to us, we believe that the council needs to be able to generate income itself, and we intend to make further progress in doing so during the current year. The administration believes that these measures need to be introduced now, giving time for them to come into effect at the beginning of the financial year, and thereby maximising income generation, and to let the public know what the new charges and the new services will be. Members will see that the presentation of these income generation measures differs from that provided to us by officers, because we asked for the unit charges to be included to provide transparency for members of the public who wonder what these are actually going to mean. Many of the increases in leisure ticket prices had been agreed 2 years ago, and the increase in income is dependent on increased membership of the various leisure schemes. Now, we have chosen to reject 3 of the income generation proposals: the charge for H-bars, the removal of the talented athlete subsidy, and the steeper increase in pay-as-you-go leisure prices. Charging a disabled resident £250 for some paint outside their house, which can't even be enforced, is simply wrong. Our talented athletes are ambassadors for our region, and the subsidy is one way we can support and thank them. As for the leisure pay-as-you-go charge, some people won't have time or the inclination to take up membership, but may want to attend or take family members on occasion. So we've rejected those 3 suggestions. If I can now turn to the other group's proposals, the Conservatives have chosen a similar tactic with regard to temporary measures, but are suggesting taking the realignment of £500,000 of existing early years spend to Scottish Government funding. On the face of it, this appears to be fairly innocuous. However, it does mean that the money provided by the Scottish Government for early years learning and childcare will be depleted by £5,000. We are told that this will have no effect on our services, but it could affect the partner organisations which also deliver the 1140 hours, and I personally would like further information on that before any further consideration of that. The Socialist Group are proposing the entire funding gap be closed by temporary measures. Again, this is not very different from ours, but I would repeat our view that all the income generation measures, and not simply the council tax, are best decided today. The Independent Group's budget is curious. They propose a swathe of cuts to produce a surplus of 2.2 million and a council tax of 4.84%. The message I took from the consultation with the public was that there was a majority in favour of council tax increases to prevent cuts and not to generate a surplus for the council. And this independent budget does beg the question as to why they are not proposing a smaller council tax rise. However, I appreciate this budget may be intended to signal to other groups what they would be prepared to agree to at the March meeting. The full budget will be set next month, and can I make it clear that all groups will be able to propose a final budget, not just the whatever group gets through today. It's not just that group that will have the chance to propose a final budget in March. That will be open to all groups. But I would like to make it clear now that this administration will not be cutting the education budget or increasing pupil-teacher ratios. We will not be making further cuts to the financial inclusion team, and we will not be cutting the roads maintenance or winter maintenance budgets. We will not be doing any of that. But in conclusion, I propose that the administration group's budget is passed today. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader. A pleasure in formally seconding the administration's interim budget proposal. As you've said, these are unusual circumstances, although arguably to a fair extent a better situation than we have had to work with in some years. I welcome the common agreement across the chamber on increasing council tax by 4.84%, not least since that is the main task for us today. I think it's also important that we set income generation measures, the fees and charges that we have outlined in our proposal, so that they are in place before the beginning of the financial year. Like you, I am looking forward to proposing or to seconding our full budget in March, in which we will set out our full spending plans for a budget which will protect education, protect services for our most vulnerable, including the financial advice and inclusion team, and invest in our region's roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Leader. So, having written a speech in regards to this, I feel very much today has been a council tax setting day. I'd like to discuss as much the process and as far as how we take this forward. So there is, as you've already outlined along with the Section 95 officer, we will potentially benefit. We thought we'd keep it very vague in regards to ours, because to declare our absolute ambitions as we go forward to the 26th of March, and we've had the reassurance from yourself, we'll get the option to do that, that would be prohibitive and probably negative reaction at this early point in time. So we've kept it very limited. We do look to do something in regards to the early learning childcare, but that's actually a level of further investment, but actually the way it's been invested, that we'd like to reprofile that and further information will come out with that in regards to 21st of March when we have to publicise our fresh budgets. So we're not getting to that level of detail today, but we've got ambitions that we want to realise through that particular service that's delivered. The 1140 were is very, very important to our group, the delivery of that and how we move forward. So today, what do we have to agree today? We have to agree council tax at least, and we feel very much that actually we've asked the question, maybe get reassurance again, but what difference does it make between increasing our charging policies have been outlined, I think, by both yourself and the independent group? The answer we've had back is absolutely marginal. It may well cause an operational difference because they wouldn't be implemented to the 1st of April next year. Our meeting is on the 26th of March. We're very much of the view, Leader, that we agree a council tax, a balanced budget, with a recognition that we do come back on the 26th of March to have a full debate. This is normally the most important, most exciting meeting of the year for the council, but today it's a non-day because of the lack of information that we've had. So, I mean, that's really as much as I want to add. I want to keep everything for the 21st to the 26th of March.
Do you want to move your budget, your current budget?
Move our budget as it is, thank you.
Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a few words?
Well, not really. I mean, I think Ian's really summed it up, to be quite honest with you. We'll discuss it later on. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Maitland.
Leader, fellow members, you have the various budgets in front of you, or will do very shortly, I hope. We have all faced the challenge of finding the 10.384 million to plug the funding gap that was identified in December. And I notice that the independent group has chosen a different approach to the revenue budget today. We have brought forward the decisions that will have to be made, some of which will have to be made at the end of March. Each of the other budgets contains a figure badged as flexibility, temporary use of non-recurring budget pressures funding. We simply choose not to dip into these one-off reserves. The independent group has examined the savings options provided by officers, together with the observations from the public and staff. We've looked at the impact assessment of each saving, and we've accepted or discarded proposals. All of the proposals have already been publicised, and indeed, elected members, you have all considered all the proposals at the last full council meeting in December. If members were willing to agree to the budget that I will table, and I hope have seconded, they would have 2.192 million of policy development funding available to allocate to projects and services that they think would be of benefit to our communities. Our initial thinking has suggested the following headings for proposals which can be developed over the next month. Children's Services Social Work, Intensive Family Support Services. Promotion and marketing of the region with our public sector partners. Support for major festivals and events. Support for a public transport integrated hub, recognising the importance of the community transport sector. Core path maintenance. Enhanced resource for galleries and museums to maximise our community's pleasure in their programmes. And tarmac. Yes, colleagues, more roads maintenance is indeed required as a matter of urgency, and you know that I'm not really very keen on it, but I do accept that there is no question about it, that we need to put more into the roads. Along with other groups, we acknowledge the need to accelerate the reduction of our region's carbon footprint. We expect all council activities to be taking this into account. Our budget offers flexibility to build in funding requirements emerging from the work of the Climate Change Working Group. Members, it seems that the Scottish Government, encouraged by the Greens, has listened to COSLA's representations and softened the impact of the settlement to local government. No group will be happier than ours when figures are finally confirmed. Members, I would like to table our budget. You've actually already got it because of the satisfactory arrangements we now have for budget setting, much better than before, Leader, and I commend it to you.
Do you have a seconder? Do you want to say something, Jim?
Thank you, Leader. I'm happy to formally second the budget.
Thank you. The Socialist Group, is it Councillor Scobie?
Thank you, Chair. And as you said in your opening remarks, there's not much difference between our budget and the administration budget. There may be differences with the other two, and in particular to the last independent budget, where our budget is looking at, the protection of and with no cuts to essential services and indeed jobs. And what we'd be looking for is to fill the vacant posts that are currently outstanding, so that we can make an attempt to return some of the services that the people require and very much desire. In that respect, we have gone out, we've spoken to the communities, to parents, parent councils, and the parent and parent councils made it very clear that they did not want to see any cuts to education, and I'm quite pleased on that. Both our budget and the administration budget is not seeing cuts to education, but I think we've got to look at investment in education, and particularly to the additional support for learners, where we have cut that budget year on year. So while we are seeing, or we are hearing from Paul today that could be an uplift of 2.8 million, this is only to cover, as you rightly say, many of the cuts that we have made over the years, which, as you rightly point out, is £106 million. And we need to see an investment in education to return some of the services. So with that 2.8 million, if once it's confirmed, then we may, our budget would be to take out the temporary use of non-recurring pressures and again put them back in, so that there's no cuts in that, and to use the 2.8 for that purpose, but also to look at the 1.7 million that would be surplus then, surplus perhaps being the wrong word, given the cuts that we have faced, but to look at the investment in education with that 1.7 million, where, this is our future, and we should be investing in our future, in our children. So in that respect, Chair, I would hope that we have the support of the administration in putting investment in education rather than the cutting. And I know we met with Adam, and Adam gave us the impression that the Labour group were of the same mind in that respect. So our budget is clear. We would have much preferred, when we didn't know what the settlement, and we still don't know what the settlement is, to go for a 6.84 where we would have no cuts, and to challenge this whole idea of putting a cap on council tax. You did refer to 11% of the population. There were very little people who joined in that consultation, but I think people would accept an increase as long as they know that it's being spent on services, and that's what the people want to protect. And in this respect, we've got to stand up to the SNP government and say that enough is enough, and that we're looking for better settlement for local government, as we are from a UK Tory government, in that we see the end of austerity and that we return to proper public services. So this is why our budget reflects that, and I'm happy to move, Chair.
Do you have a second, Councillor Sloan?
Yeah, happy to second, Chair, just with maybe an observation on the as we are such a tight group, as you'll realise, Willie's already said what I would say on the budget. But an observation on the independent group's budget. I'm amazed that somebody like Councillor Maitland, who was elected as the champion of schools and the champion of education, now wants to tear it all down. It really, I find it incredulous.
You're seconding the motion here. You're seconding the socialist budget, okay? Can I move to members? A period of member debate, not forever, but Councillor Wilson, Councillor Dryburgh, anybody else? Okay.
Thank you, Leader. I don't think it'll come as any great shock that I'm, supporting the administration budget today. You outlined no cuts in education, no cuts in roads. and no cuts in the financial inclusion team, and I'm very pleased to add my support to that. And of course, this year, it's always quite strange for me because you spend months on a budget and then after, the 26th, 27th or 28th of February, it's all over and it's a bit of a culture shock, but this year we get the fun of doing it twice. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to the end of next month as well. I think one thing, obviously today, all groups have just agreed to, agree the current capital investment strategy, and I'm sure that there will be proposals that come forward in the next 4 weeks. But I think that we should just note that, what has been discussed, and what was alluded to yesterday in the press as to what additional money we may get, that the settlement that we have from the Scottish Government is a £40 million cut to our capital investment strategy over the next 10 years. And, I've had various conversations with politicians, with people on the ground and with our people in our communities. And that £40 million is going to be a huge loss. And that isn't just £40 million we were hoping to get. That is £40 million that we have planned to receive, that we will no longer receive, and will require us to make some very difficult decisions, and will make it even more difficult to fix the state of our roads, to fix the state of our schools, and to improve our region for the better. I do have one question, and it's on the Conservative budget. Within the budget document, it says that there will be no impact in the impact assessments. Of course, an impact assessment is a very essential and important part of setting a budget, and indeed any decision of the council. It might be a bit of a daft laddie question, but when I look at the summary of impact assessment on the council website, it says that there will be 1 positive impact, 11 no impacts, and 1 negative impact. But it doesn't state that on the face of the budget, and I'd be quite keen to know what the Tory budget isn't telling us and what the impact will actually be on members of staff in our council.
I suppose going back to my previous, sorry, Leah. So going back to my previous point, ultimately we would, again, we don't want to divulge too much because we've got to spend a lot of time over the next couple of weeks, but we look to make an enhancement to deliver 1140, and this would be a start of a reprofiling of, and that's obviously being considered in regards to the impact assessment, and that detail will come out on the 21st of March for further consumption.
Councillor Wilson?
But Council Leader, we are being asked to agree and vote on the budgets that are in front of us. The Conservative budget, as tabled, says that there will be no impact whatsoever in the impact assessment and the summary of impact assessment on our templates, but the summary of the entire budget impact assessment says that there will be a negative impact. And all I'm asking is that on what we're voting on today, where is that negative impact? Because it is important that we consider that as a council. Impact assessments are an essential part and an important part of our budget setting and decision-making process in this council. So what is the Conservative budget that we are voting on today not telling us?
Councillor Nicholson wanted to come in that point.
Just on that same point, is just, and I'm kind of half stolen my question there. We're here to vote on, on what's in front of us, and that's what's in front of us. And I'm quite entitled to ask for some detail on that. It's, a cut of £500,000, whichever way you look at it, in the staff costs in the early years, into primary, early learning and childcare, and just what kind of impact that would have on that. They're asking us to vote for their budget, so I think it's important we do have the details within that.
Councillor Driver.
Yeah, thanks very much. You're the same as Adam. I'm sure it'll be no surprise that I'll be fully supporting the administration's budget today. I think there's a few ambitious options that we can take forward in March, and I'm looking forward to what we can actually do. And I want to talk to in particular about what the Association of Public Service Excellence has done across the whole of councils right across the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. They are looking at income generation, and I think that's going to be really, really important across all councils in the United Kingdom to make sure that they can fund things that they want to do. All councils are seeing where they can actually get the income generation and then spend on local services or even to improve those services, and I think that's a really positive thing that we need to do. We need to sell our region, and I think if we improve those services, we can sell our region as part of that. And for instance, we are the host region for the Royal Highland Show this year, for instance. Now, the charity of choice, and I'm sure nobody will be surprised when I say the charity of choice is the Veterans Garden in Dumfries, and we will be there at the Royal Highland Show helping, hopefully, to raise the the actual project itself for veterans, not just from Dumfries and Galloway, but right across Scotland and the north of England. So I'm looking forward to the March budget where we get further into detail about the income generation and where we can support our own small to medium enterprises within Dumfries and Galloway. And I agree, we need to spend some more money on roads as well.
Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Really just a quick point on the administration budget proposal. We're proposing no additional cuts. What we are proposing is an income generation proposal. For years, we've asked the council, to close the funding gap, not only with the cuts, but also to look at ways of generating income. And which one of us in this room does not want more fines within a region from littering, fly tipping and dog fouling?
Thank you. Councillor Hislop.
Just in response to Councillor Wilson's point, I think he will find that the information where he pointed out there was no impact is actually the business case part 3. It's an officer document that was presented to us, whereas the full impact assessment, as in the summary for the whole budget, does actually state that there are positive and negatives. Now, my understanding is we don't have any of those in front of us, but they are all available within the Council's website as required. So one case does not make, if the information officers have given us is wrong, we apologise for the information that we receive. But this is what was in the business cases, and that's where it says that there is no impact.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, it's on that point, is it?
Yeah. Councillor Hislop should not blame council officers. It's quite clearly on the summary of the Conservative budget impact assessment, which the contact person for the process is Councillor Ian Crothers, not any officer of this council. It clearly states that there is 1 positive impact, 11 no impacts and 1 negative impact. That is not what it states in the Conservative budget proposal, and it is Councillor Ian Crothers who led on the summary of the impact assessment of the entire budget. I did it for the administration group, and I'm sure that somebody did it for the independent group and somebody did it for the socialist group.
Councillor Hislop.
Chair, I am not disputing what it says on the summary of the full budget, but the case where it says that there was none is on one element of the budget, not the whole budget. This is, if the officers have given us a paper that is not correct, then we apologise for that. But this is a straight lift from the officers' business cases for the transformation programme with regard to the internal 1.1. Now, the whole budget was then assessed. Now, my understanding, all budgets have been through the whole budget assessment, and within the whole budget assessment, there is positive and negative. That is within the web page, which, as far as I know, no budget has came forward today with an impact assessment on the whole thing. It is there for members to go and research. Councillor Wilson has researched our one, and yes, our one does have positive and negative. But the case, it's for the business case, part 3, for an individual, quite clearly says that there are no impacts. Now, that's like saying apples and pears, I think the saying is. There are 2 different documents, and because of that, they will be different. The total budget does have an impact, but this one doesn't.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Try to get my head around Councillor Hislop's arguments there, but anyway, it's the reprofiling is a cut of £500,000. There's no getting away from that, but whatever way you look at it. Just on the independence budget, can I maybe get some clarification regarding, I know there's something like 62.6 full-time equivalent staff cuts within their budget proposal, and a lot of them are on education as well. So the 62.6 full-time equivalents, I don't know what that actually means in staff, whether it be 100 staff or whether it be, whether it be in that figure I've asked to have a look at. But on the teachers, the reductions in them, wonder what kind of impact that has on the Scottish Government's budget, and what they say, and we've been bitten by this before, is if there's any change in the ratio of teachers. I know it's in the national level now, but the whole cut in teachers would make an impact on that national level, but they look at the individual councils who cut teachers and they then have the opportunity to take money back off them. And I wonder if that's been in the risk assessment.
Councillor McClelland.
Thank you very much, Leader. The Leader, I'd just like to congratulate all four groups for tabling their budgets today. The process that we've followed this time, it's been quite clear that we've involved the public through consultation, and in that consultation, when the templates were made available, it was also quite clear that there was a significant support for the council tax rise of 4.84%, and I welcome that to see that all four groups have actually tabled the 4.84, and I think that is the main purpose of today's business, to get this 4.84% through so that our staff can then proceed with the appropriate work to get the direct debits and everything in place for the start of April. So I don't think we should lose sight of that, and I think we should probably move on to getting that passed. But I do think we should just take a moment to reflect the process this time, and the fact that we've been quite transparent with the templates, and those templates were put out into the public domain. And because of that, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of involvement, and where the independent group, they've brought the templates today, but I think the other three groups, we're probably in the situation that we'd put the balanced budget forward with the fact that we anticipate much further debate and clarity as we get to end of March. We have seen a bit of the sort of, I'll call it the pre-party fighting already started here. I would have thought that debate would probably be much better served when we come to deal with the full budgets, when we've got clarity and detail at the end of March. So I'm happy to express my support to the budget from the administration, and I'm really delighted to see on there that we did not take into our budget plans the post cuts to the financial inclusion team. They do an absolutely terrific job, and they've done really well over the last couple of years helping our vulnerable in our society. So I'm quite happy to see if we can move on, Leader, and get this get to the vote as quick as we can. Thank you.
Chair, just on that, I hope there was mention of the pre-party. I hope that doesn't include me, because I'm in no party.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Leader. It's actually quite an interesting one for myself. I find myself with no political allegiance, so I'm kind of looking at it from all directions. And it's interesting how the political sort of turn and twist has been put on it as budget cuts. Now, whether if they want to fight amongst themselves as to which government's the baddie in all of this, I don't really care. What I do care about is the fact that, as my understanding is, these are efficiency savings. And as a business person, if you're presented with efficiency savings and you know that your income is being reduced, you actually have to look at these efficiency savings very, very openly, and you've got to really consider what they are, because we are going into a time of transformation. We've had all these transformational meetings. If we don't embrace this properly for the future, we're going to find ourselves in a real problem of stagnation. In fact, we're already getting into a state of stagnation by not recognising that the council taxpayer is contributing to trying to keep the council going, and as such they need to be recognised. And if they're going to be recognised, they need to get something back in return. Everybody deserves something back in return. So what I would ask is that we really give full consideration to these efficiency savings, stop all this nonsense about budget cuts, and actually embrace it as it should be, and being a totally efficient council for the future. So please take on board what the independents have done. We have considered it thoroughly, and we believe that we are trying to find monies that we can put into future development for this council and our region.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. It's nice to see you still here in the hot seat 1 year later. Remarkable, really. Yeah. Of course, we can see you, but they can't see us in the next room. We don't have the technical ability to broadcast that far, let alone live stream on the internet with helpful Gaelic subtitles. This is a third budget for many of us, and I think in the first one I predicted that someday we'll have to live off the local economy, so we better build one. And everyone else ignored that, at least certainly the coalition did. And here we are, looking to live from local income streams with a weak economy surrounding us, which is not a good situation. Last year, there was an arithmetical chance of a positive change in the administration, but things fizzled out. And if they fizzle out again this year, there might be a journalist looking for a sort of a headline strip to go with, and it would be that the independents are risking being chucked out of the Labour Party. They've produced their own budget. That's a bit of a shock. 3 years, barely a pulse, and then suddenly 106 pages of electrocardiogram output, but unfortunately not many brainwaves. But they did, yeah, that's... Anyway, the underlying story is that the reason that we have a lack of success as a council, and the reason that we have low public esteem out there, is that we have an institutional problem, and somebody needs to flag it up, and I'd like to flag it up today, but it was previously flagged up in 2012, and when there was a council audit, and I've got here the quote from its conclusion. It said, Dumfries and Galloway is a pleasant backwater. However, its administration, councillors, failed to lead the officers. In short, the horses are riding the jockeys. Now, that was a damning indictment then, Madam Leader, but even the dogs on the street know that situation.
I can point out to you
persisted.
there's been an audit report since then. It didn't say anything like that. So,
well,
you're casting back to 2012, and that's not
that's
appropriate
the situation
for the current administration.
Right. Well, I can have my view, and that's the position I perceive today, that the administration like the trappings of power, and they take the odd tidbit, like they're going to have an anti-poverty gesture here, an anti-climate change thing there, an anti-Semitism gesture there, but they're not actually controlling the council. The control of the council is fundamentally in control of the officers who have stepped into the vacuum. And the administration are probably victims of a language they don't understand, like doublespeak. The transformation programme, you can say that's the unions like it the way it is. We've got a consultation process, meaning they'll think it's their idea. And action group means don't hold your breath. So you yourself said we're going to have to lose 1,000 staff, and yet compulsory redundancy wasn't even tabled in the consultations. Now, so that proves that it is, as a lot of people think out there, that the council exists for its own benefit. So what would be the solution to this? How can we address the democratic deficit that is an administration that can't lead the council? We have to up its skill base and widen its mandate. Now, in this room, there's a man who's actually diligently attended to all business, has relentlessly sought consensus. And if John Curtis was here, he would tell us that this man commands about 45% of the public support right now. And I knew, God knows, I've been his harshest critic, but Ian Carruthers deserves to be in the administration. Part of it. Yeah. And why? Well, if actually anybody can make a moral case, I'm happy to give way for a moment. If somebody can make a moral case why he should not be in the administration, step up now.
Councillor James, can I just... Councillor James,
Exactly,
I don't want
can't
this
do
to
it.
deteriorate into some sort of dogfight. Councillor Carruthers can take my post, and you obviously think I'm extremely stupid. Not generally being described as stupid during my life, but clearly that is your opinion of me. I can't recognise double speaking, that I can be wound round Gavin's little finger. But Councillor Carruthers can become in the administration. He just needs to challenge us and to win a vote. That is all. It's easy enough.
Well, you yourself might be one of those who would survive the cut down to the brightest and best, to be in a cabinet of all the talents. It might include, it might be actually diverse. It might include a dancer from Dundrennan or a stegosaur from Stranraer. It would be an all-star lineup. So
Councillor Nicholson, yes. Yeah, we're discussing
so let's look at the job in hand.
To chuck insults at comrades from Stranraer or whatever. I mean, I think it's unnecessary. And I'm going to call a halt to it. I think that really is enough of that. At the moment, I know that you are putting forward a particular position.
What I want to, so I'll sum up here.
So James, I'm in the chair, okay?
But
I'm in the chair. I control.
Give you the right to shut me down. I mean,
Please be quiet.
The course of action I propose is that the other teams
Councillor
gang
James,
together.
I've asked you to be quiet. I've asked you to stop talking. Okay? Please switch your mic off. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I think protecting 6,000 high-paid jobs in this region is a very good news story for the local economy, and that's what this administration budget does.
And Councillor Crothers.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks for the compliments, David. But setting them to the side, Leader, I think you've outlined the process, and that process may or may not be followed. I imagine it probably will at some point in the future. We've tried it before, we'll try it again. And we spoke about that face to face, so we've got a reasonable understanding. Going back to what Councillor McClelland said, I think he was starting to bring a degree of rationale to this meeting here. I think he's absolutely right when it comes to, okay, let's get on with business. We're really here to agree a council tax. We can take the approach where we start being very critical over each other's budgets, but I think it's not for today, it's for the 26th of March, so if we could possibly move on.
I think probably it's time to move on to the votes. And I think we have a motion, amendment, a counter amendment, and a counter amendment. So I'll hand over to Nick.
Just to clarify for members, so they're completely clear as to what's what. Yes, as the leader said, we've got the motion, which is the administration budget, the amendment, which is the Conservative group budget, the counter amendment, which is the independent group budget, and we have a counter amendment, which is the Dumfries and Galloway Socialist group budget. So, in terms of how we'll proceed with the vote, the first vote will be between the counter amendment, i.e. the independent group, and the counter amendment, the Dumfries and Galloway Socialist group. So, moving to the vote then.
Councillor McGregor.
Sorry to be a pain. I'm just slightly confused because you said in your speech at the beginning that all budgets would be able to be presented at the next meeting. If we vote down 3 of the budgets just now with the 6-month ruling, how will we be able to retable all 4?
But you... it's a full budget. I get what you're saying, but it's a full budget. I mean, basically it's a 4.84%. And I presume in the Conservative budget, their proposal will still be in it, but there will be additional. Because otherwise, we would be forced to use the temporary flexibility if we're not able to vote in budgets again. Councillor Crothers.
So just for clarity, we've had this discussion offline as well, obviously. I think it is an important point that Councillor McGregor's raised, but my understanding is quite clear. So, say, for instance, the administration budget was to be agreed today, then what can be presented at the next full council from the other 3 groups, whatever one wins, is ultimately whatever decisions made today will stand, so it'll be additionality to that or surplus, whatever it is. But certainly flexibility around about that.
Yes, I'm sorry, yeah, you wouldn't be knocking out that particular bit. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the counter amendment versus the counter amendment, to be clear. Leader?
Abstain.
Deputy Leader?
Abstain.
Councillor Bell?
Abstain.
Councillor Blake?
Abstain.
Councillor Doogie Campbell?
Abstain.
Councillor John Campbell?
Abstain.
Councillor Ian Carruthers?
Abstain.
Councillor Karen Carruthers?
Abstain.
Councillor Charteris? Councillor Dempster?
Abstain.
Councillor Dryborough?
Abstain.
Councillor Fairburn? Councillor Ferguson?
Abstain.
Councillor Hagman?
Abstain.
Councillor Howie? Councillor Hislop? Councillor Ingalls? Councillor James? Councillor Johnston?
Abstain.
Councillor Lever?
Abstain.
Councillor Little? Councillor McGregor? Councillor McCammon? Councillor McClelland?
Abstain.
Councillor McComb?
Counter.
Councillor McKee.
Abstain.
Councillor Maitland.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Marshall.
Abstain.
Councillor Martin.
In.
Councillor Nicholson.
Counter.
Councillor Ronnie. Councillor Scobie.
Counter.
Councillor Sloan.
Another 2 counters.
Counter. Councillor Stitt. Councillor Surtees. Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wood.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Young.
Abstain.
Okay, so we had 4 members voting in favour of the counter amendment, 3 in favour of the counter, and 32 in abstained. So that means that the counter amendment is carried. So we then move to the next vote, which will be between the amendment, which is the Conservative group proposals, and the counter amendment, which is the independent group proposals. So it's amendment is Conservative group, counter is independent group. Okay, so leader.
Abstain.
Deputy leader.
Abstain.
Councillor Bell.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Abstain.
Councillor John Campbell.
Abstain.
Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Karen Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Charteris. Councillor Dempster.
Abstain.
Councillor Dryborough.
Abstain.
Councillor Fairburn.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Abstain.
Councillor Hagman.
Abstain.
Councillor Howie. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Ingalls. Councillor James. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Lever.
Abstain.
Councillor Little. Councillor McGregor. Councillor McCammon. Councillor McClelland.
Abstain.
Councillor McComb.
Counter.
Councillor McKee.
Abstain.
Councillor Maitland.
Counter amendment.
Councillor Marshall.
Abstain.
Councillor Martin.
Abstain.
Councillor Nicholson.
Abstain.
Councillor Ronnie. Councillor Scobie.
Abstain.
Councillor Sloan. Councillor Stitt.
Abstain.
Councillor Surtees. Councillor Thompson.
Abstain.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wood.
Counter amendment.
And Councillor Young.
Abstain.
So we had 13 members voting in favour of the amendment, 4 voting in favour of the counter amendment, and 22 abstaining. Therefore, the amendment is carried, and we now move to the vote between the motion, which is the administration's proposals, and the amendment, which is the Conservative group's proposals. Leader.
Motion.
Deputy Leader.
Motion.
Councillor Bell.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Doogie Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor John Campbell.
Motion.
Councillor Ian Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Karen Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Charteris. Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Dryber.
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn. Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Hagman.
Motion.
Councillor Howie. Councillor Hislop. Councillor Ingalls. Councillor James. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor Little.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor McCammon. Councillor McClelland.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor Marshall.
Motion.
Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholson.
Motion.
Councillor Ronnie. Councillor Scobie. Councillor Sloan. Councillor Stitt.
Motion.
Councillor Surtees. Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wood.
Abstain.
Councillor Young. So we have 25 members voting in favour of the motion, 13 in favour of the amendment, 1 abstention, meaning the motion is carried.
Thank you, everybody. Councillor James, this stupid, gullible woman is still in the chair, but maybe not only for another month, but you'll have to put up with me until then. Okay, let's move on to item 7. That is family leave for councillors, a report by the Head of People and Transformation. This report provides details of the terms of the COSLA guidance and draft policy of family leave for elected members. Elected members have no legal rights to family leave of any kind. This may discourage people from standing for election or prevent existing councillors who wish to start a family from continuing in office. On 27th of September 2019, the COSLA Leaders Meeting endorsed guidance for circulation to Scottish local authorities for adoption on a voluntary basis. And Stuart Clanahan is here to assist members with any questions. Any question, councillors? Councillor Carruthers and Councillor Wilson.
I think because of our 6-month rule, I really wanted to understand from the offer, what's the difference in real terms? What does it actually mean to a councillor? I know it's about better retention councillors, it's about attracting councillors, so on and so forth, but because of the 6-month rule we have, it's embedded within the 1973 Local Government Act. What is the actual? To you then, Stuart, what is the difference?
Thank you, Chair. Through yourself, obviously I'm not the author of the guidance that's been issued. That's come through the COSLA leaders process. However, there's clearly been a push by the special interest group to look at increasing and developing the diversity and the opportunities, particularly for women who make up 29% of Scottish councillors, and it provides that additional flexibility that allows them to come into public office whilst also considering the opportunities for families, etc. I think obviously the guidance is not legislative in nature, and it's voluntary. However, it does move quite a way into addressing a gap there in terms of providing broadly similar terms to a workforce term. However, clearly elected members are not employees, hence the reason that the guidance has been created. So, didn't write it, but adopted the guidance as coming through from COSLA.
Got a secondary to that, Leader, if you don't mind, just in regards to, so we're not employees, but if you ask HMRC, we're employees, they would say that we actually are in real terms for why we are the council, as the 43 collective councillors. But I don't feel as if my question's been answered, Stuart, because I've read this from front to back, and principally look at it and think, okay, this is actually quite a good move. But what's the difference? What is the impact? So what is the difference between, because it's legislated, so the 6-month rule is there, and the council can make a decision. So say 5.5 months in, non-attendance at a meeting for whatever reason, and say somebody then that this guidance came in, so we agree this today that it's guidance, does that then allow an extra number of weeks beyond the 6-month rule as a member got to come back in and attend the council or represent the council at a meeting? I just think that's the type of guidance. I just don't, because I have read it from front to back, I think I understand the principles of it and in agreement with the principles, but just to compare to what we've got now and what can be acted. When I read it, I'll be honest, I actually felt some political groups are working in different ways across Scotland, some maybe in a more dictatorial ways, but maybe other groups do, and that's where this was coming from. So just really need those questions answered.
The council has discretion to extend leave. For example, if somebody was seriously ill and unable to come in for a meeting, I think they have discretion to extend leave where that's necessary.
So my question is, and the difference between, I know we've done that in the past, I remember going back to 2007, that actually happened with a particular member who was very ill, and it went on for about 18 months. So we've been through that process, we understand that can happen. So say that a person, just the case scenario, was offered 5.5 months and all of a sudden this guidance kicked in. What happens at that point? Is there a conflict with legislation, or are we predetermining, okay, this person may well, at that point, can the paternity, maternity, so on and so forth, the guidance contained within here will kick in?
Certainly the guidance is obviously specifically for maternity and paternity leave, but of course it does mention specifically that the meeting requirement of 1 every 6 months would still be a requirement, even if you were on maternity leave. And that would be regarded as effectively a keeping in touch day, which would be a similar measure for a workforce term whilst on maternity.
Thanks. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I know Stuart said particularly women, and it was probably just a sort of phrase, but I mean, as somebody who's been told in previous relationships that if I want kids, my career will take the hit, I think I've got quite a bit of an interest in this. One thing that I would say about the draft guidance is that it focuses quite a lot on the sort of income, and I just feel that, you know, as a councillor and indeed like MSPs and MPs, because we're not regarded as employees, you know, we are in a bit of a better situation than some of our low-paid workers who go on maternity or paternity leave and lose quite a chunk of their salary through the statutory pay process. And one thing that isn't touched anywhere is about how do you make sure that there are things like proxy voting in place, so that actually, you know, if I was to take parental leave I mean, I would prioritise going along to community council meetings and holding surgeries than coming into full council meetings based on the role that you still play. And of course, we've seen many MPs now take particular maternity leave where they have made arrangements to do work in their constituency but not travel to Parliament. So I think happy to adopt the draft guidance, but I think there's these sort of wider implications that go beyond the income and the money side of it, and actually how we can make sure that any councillor who is going to take some form of parental leave or adoption leave is able to make sure that they're able to represent their constituents, because I think, particularly for me, that would be my primary concern.
Councillor Hislop.
It was the exact same point. If you go into someone who takes maternity leave, they have to then give you a sort of date for return. Now, if you are taking maternity or paternity leave through being a councillor, does that mean to say you have the same status of 28 days before you can actually come back and sit and do your job? Because that's what it's maternity leave. You go away, you then get someone in to do the work. But does that mean to say you're barred from taking part in votes? If there was say today there was a budget vote and that one person could make a difference, are they barred because they're actually on maternity leave and haven't indicated that they're coming back yet?
I presume not, because they're not actually employees, but I'm sure Stuart has the answer.
Certainly the arrangements that are borne out within the guidance seem to reflect the paperwork and the audit trail for ensuring that the income side is protected, and that goes back to Councillor Wilson's point. So the notification requirements are in there, they're embedded within the guidance. I think beyond that, there isn't anything specific there, but clearly the fact that this is guidance, and if there are any specifics that would require to be included within future guidance about future council business, then I'm sure that can be incorporated.
So that would become part of the sort of draft policy once it's worked up, and presumably that would go to the Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee for further discussion. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I just wanted to say that I really welcome this paper before us today, and I am really supportive of it. It clearly does make reference to paternity leave. However, the fact that our numbers are as such, even looking around the chamber, is clearly there are issues about getting women into politics. And I would say that there's probably a wider debate to be had, and I look forward to having that in the future. But I think it's really important that we do endorse this policy, but we also look to extend it in the future. And certainly the points previously made about being able to access the facilities with online voting, etc. I'm aware one of my colleagues, Kelly Parry, in Midlothian Council, who was on maternity leave, was able to join debates from her home while looking after her newborn child. And certainly I think it's really important that we do create an environment that is accessible and possible for women to attend. On personal experience, my son is really, really familiar with our group room and has sat for many, many hours while we have been in this debate, because there's no childcare facilities for elected members. And I think that's something that we really do need to address for the future if we're actually serious about representing properly our constituents in Dumfries and Galloway. But I just wanted to say that I'm really pleased to see this, and I'd support us adopting this moving forward.
Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Leader. Having become a father twice since I was first elected in 2007, I think that something along these lines would probably have been a benefit at the time. There was certainly no specific structure or requirement, so I just took some time off, and everyone understood that it's only natural, understandable, and I'd be back in due course. And of course, was back fairly quickly because I'm a bit of a workaholic and don't really like spending all that much time at home, which is just one of these things. And my children have become accustomed to that over the years, certainly. But I'm bound to say that I think, while this is by its nature imperfect, and I think it's imperfect because our role is a rather strange one and is not standard, and in as much as we are not employees, neither should we be, but we are for tax purposes, for example, as Councillor Carruthers said. We occupy a curious sort of halfway house in which there are a great deal of expectations on us, quite rightly. but not necessarily the same protections and entitlements that we ensure, for example, are afforded to our staff. To an extent, that is simply a consequence of the role that we hold. But I do think that there is something to be said, particularly if we are serious about trying to see local government and representation in local government as diverse as we can make it, or as diverse as the people who wish to enter it, then measures like this, even though they may not be perfect, are bound to be, in my view, a step forward and a step in the right direction. We ought to be welcoming elected members of all ages above the statutory minimum, and recognise that some of them may very well not have a family when they start, and start a family while they are in office, and make reasonable arrangements to ensure that that important job of starting a family is something that can be conducted, as well as the important job of representing your constituents. I was happy to support this at COSLA, and I'm very happy to support it today. I'll move the recommendations if need be, Leader.
Okay, Councillor Carruthers.
Just a small point. So, Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee are doing a review in regards to member support, what that looks like across the Police and Galway Council. I just wonder if it's worth putting a recommendation that we ask them to consider this as part of that review. It's feeding back to the full council September, so there'll be a full, because there's a lot of points, I think important points and relevant points have been brought up that go beyond what we're agreeing today. So that could come back and be presented then. So if we just can refer that to Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee to consider it as part of that review, Leader.
I don't know if I think worth a further discussion. Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Nicholson, and then Councillor Wilson. Okay, it was you. Okay, Councillor Wilson.
No, I'm just going to say it's within Audit, Risk and Scrutiny's remit to decide what their scrutiny review considers, and therefore I don't think it requires, and it would probably set a wrong precedent for full council to determine what Audit, Risk and Scrutiny is or is not required, and so I think that it's up to Audit, Risk and Scrutiny to look into that if they so wish.
Right, Councillor Carruthers?
Just to ask them to take this as evidence as part of that review is what I was saying. I thought that's it done and dusted today. Just taking on the comments that have been made, I thought it would be appropriate.
I think there will be some discussion of the draft policy anyway. I mean, this is just agreeing to adopt the guidance and then draft a policy based on the guidance, so we will be discussing the policy anyway, I would have thought. Councillor Nicholson. Sorry. You got scored off before you got a chance to speak.
Sorry, I'll put that down. I'm supportive of this, but I don't think it goes far enough. And I'll tell you why it doesn't go far enough. It only refers to some children. It doesn't refer to children, particularly grandparents or people who are in a kinship care setting or a guardianship setting. You have to go through a formal adoption process to be in it. So that's not there. And there's also the issue here, and I think, although we lost in Stuart either, there's we have a considerable number of us here may become carers. Right? So it should be, this has to be not just about childcare, this has to be about our full family and how we care for our family, because there's very specific legislation for employees about carers' leave. So why is it not included in this as well? So, I welcome this. I think there's another bit of work we need to look at to take it a wee bit further.
Thanks. Councillor Nicholson.
Certainly the
So go ahead, yeah. Yeah, then I'll take Councillor Nicholson afterwards. Okay.
No, sorry, Leader. Just to say that obviously the guidance does refer to adoption leave. We do have a carers policy, and that carers policy specifically for the workforce. We know that, but there's certainly opportunities that we can look to see where we can look to extend that if possible.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I think Councillor Ferguson brought up important points there as well. It's about kinship carers. It's about looking at overall, and it's about the council being seen as family friendly. Councillor Hagman brought in an important point as well about childcare within for councillors as well within buildings. So I think all that needs to be looked at. But I'm quite in favour of this. This paper come along, and I support that.
So I think we could probably move to the recommendations now. We've noted the terms of the guidance and the financial, legal or other implications. We agreed to adopt the guidance and draft policy based on the principles, but we actually obviously there will be further discussion around drafting the policy, and I think we would seek to have other opportunities to discuss that further, because obviously quite a lot of good points are raised in discussion today. Okay, agreed?
As members, there may well be a time lag between members' consideration of the operational impact of this and how you may want to work it, and individual members wishing to take advantage of some of the benefits. I just wonder, we wouldn't want to disadvantage anyone who fall under this in the future because of our delay of scrutiny and governance. So I just think that perhaps that's something that group leaders might want to discuss with the leader of how you could manage that process internally, following the guidance as is just now, so that nobody could be disadvantaged in the interim as we try.
I think also because we have the capability of making exceptions, we actually can deal with that. Although it's not guidance, we can deal with it going forward if that does come to a situation where somebody is in a position where they need to take it. Okay, shall we move on to item 8, which is the recruitment and selection of the Head of Education Quality and Curriculum and the Head of Education Learning and Resources. This is a report by the Head of People and Transformation. Members are asked to determine the arrangements for the appointment to the post of Head of Education, Quality and Curriculum and the re-advertisement of Head of Service, Learning and Resources within Education and Learning. As a result of the recent appointment of the Head of Education, Quality and Curriculum into the post of Director, Skills, Education and Learning, the Head of Education post is now vacant. This is a key post with strategic responsibility as the Council's appointed Chief Education Officer within Education and Learning for Quality and Curriculum, including education and learning, quality assurance, school performance and improvement, early years and additional support for learning. This post is part of the corporate management team, provides leadership, vision and strategic direction within education and learning, and works across the organisation and with heads of service to deliver transformation and council priorities. The Head of Education, Resources and Support post was subject to a formal external recruitment process between September to November 2019. No appointment was made by the Employment and Appeals Subcommittee on the 7th of November 2019, and the post remains vacant. It was agreed that the post would be re-advertised externally following the appointment of the Director of Skills, Education and Learning. And Stuart is still here to assist us with any questions. Has anybody got any questions on this report? Okay. So are we happy to agree the appointment process for the Head of Education, Quality and Curriculum? Agreed. Okay. And agree the timetable and key stages for the appointment process to these posts. And we note the need to re-advertise the post of Head of Education, Learning and Resources. Thank you. We're now moving on to the minutes for approval. And the first, I don't seem to have a list here. Do you have a list somewhere? Do I have a list of them? Yeah. Got the actual papers, but I don't think I seem to. Ah, here they are. Right. I've got the people. I haven't got the people in that. Okay, can we move to the right? Annandale and Eskdale Area Committee of the 27th of November 2019.
Happy to move, Leader.
Second.
Happy second.
Okay. Audit, Risk and Scrutiny Committee of 4th of December.
Move. Leader.
I'm pleased to second them.
Castle Douglas Common Good Fund Subcommittee of the 22nd of January.
Happy to second.
Communities Committee of the 28th of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Economy Resources Committee of the 30th of January. Just move him.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
Right. Education and Learning Committee of the 15th of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Employment and Appeals Subcommittee, 31st of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Local Review Body of 6th of December.
Happy to move. Happy to second.
Pension Subcommittee of 5th of December.
Moved. Second.
Police Fire and Rescue Subcommittee, 5th of December.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Sanctuary Common Good Fund, a subcommittee of 21st of January.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Okay. Social Work Services Committee of the 4th of February.
Happy to move, Chair, but just before you go on, do you see the next one for Stranraer Common Good Fund Subcommittee? I think there's a bit of a curiosity there that I'm sure will become apparent.
Okay.
Happy to second, Chair.
Right, so Stranraer Common Good Fund Subcommittee on the 4th of December.
Tommy, you'll have to move.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
No, Tommy will have to move it. You'll have to move it because Gusty's not
Okay, there was
here.
only one member present, so it can't be moved. And that member is not here. So it has to come back next time. Was it quiet if there's only one person there? I would have thought that was quiet, was it? Anyway, let's deal with it. Let's look into that and deal with it later. The Stranraer Common Good Fund Subcommittee of the 18th of December, and I hope somebody was at that one. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, can I have, obviously Andrew's not here. Councillor Scobie, would you move that one? The 18th of December, you were present. Oh, Ross was there, or Councillor Surtees? Okay. I think they were both there, weren't they? Do you have a seconder for that one?
I'll second that.
Yeah, I do have a proposer for that one in that case. Because you were present, I think, as you see, Councillor Scobie was there, you were present. Councillor Juicy, Councillor Scobie and Councillor Surtees.
Propose it, Chair.
Okay, that's fine, lovely, thanks. Next bunch of minutes are just for noting. And therefore, we move on to election item 11, which is any other business deemed urgent by the chairman due to a need for a decision. I suppose it actually wasn't urgent. The motion was just too late to be submitted. And in view of the fact that we will have a lot of business in March, because the rest of the budget has to be discussed there, I was keen to have as much business as would have gone to the regular March meeting, taken at this meeting to free up time there. And so therefore, I have agreed under slightly different circumstances to take Councillor Scobie's motion. And Heather Collington is here to speak to the report if necessary. Members will have received late notice of the receipt of a notice of motion outside the usual timescale submitted by Councillor Scobie and seconded by Councillor Sloan in respect of nursing home care in Stranraer. And I've given you the reasons why I agreed to take this late notice of motion. And I also, it's a motion of a sensitive nature, and we wouldn't really want them to be delayed anyhow. Members are asked to consider the terms of the motion proposed by Councillor Scobie and seconded by Councillor Sloan, as set out in the appendix to the papers which have been circulated this morning. As members have not had much time to consider the papers relating to this motion, do members want to adjourn for 5 minutes to consider? Or are you happy to take it, Councillor Carruthers?
I suppose if you're happy to take it, I'd like to make some comments in regards to it before we start, because I see this as a declarable interest.
Okay, right, okay. But we're happy to just go to proceed. You don't want to take any time out to look at it. No. Okay. So can I invite Councillor Scobie to propose his motion? Sorry. Okay.
I think it's 2 points. I think withdraw the allegation, which Councillor Drivers just mentioned, but I think I would like to say a couple of things because I think it's a declarable interest for me, and I will leave the room, but I just get that point. I'd like to remove the allegation first, Leader.
So you have a declarable interest in this particular matter? We'd actually take declarations of interest at the beginning of the meeting, but... And
this wasn't on the agenda at that point, so this is any other business, wasn't there? So that's why I've left it at this point. So reading it in full, so as Councillor Scobie and Sloan, the mover and seconder, and actually yourself, Leader. So this was heavily discussed at the Clinical and Care Governance Committee. You chaired that. I raised a number of points. I've been very supportive towards the outcomes that's trying to be achieved here. And because of my position on the Integration Joint Board, what I said at that Clinical and Care Governance Committee meeting, and along with what I've already said to Councillor Scobie and Sloan, I'll leave the meeting and I'll always stay. I don't want to prejudice any further points I raised within Integration Joint Board, so on and so forth, so I'll leave the room.
Just on that point, I thought that if you remember, membership of the IJB was an exception. That was otherwise, I would have to immediately leave the room as well, because I've discussed this at Clinical Care Governance.
It's up to each individual. I just think because of the proposed actions I would like to take with this, a senior member in regards to Integration Joint Board, I've got a fixed position. I've got a position in this that I'm already carrying through, so I think that I shouldn't be here to influence the council at all in regards to this. They should make their own decision because I've already made my personal view. So I'll leave the meeting.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, can I invite Councillor Scobie to to present his motion? As Councillor Ferguson wants to say.
Is that a point of order? We've withdrawn the delegation from the Social Work Committee, am I right? Yeah,
Yes.
but we should also withdraw delegation from Wigtonshire Area Committee, because the performance of the very localised thing that's here, it's a technical point. I think we should be withdrawing delegation from both.
Okay, yeah, unfortunately that wasn't on my notes either, but you're probably right there. Yes. Can we agree to withdraw delegation from both Social Work and Wigton Area Committees? Councillor Nicholson.
Any decisions or discussions at any area committee have no relevance to this, because you can make a decision at the area committee, come back and you can have a completely different decision. So.
Okay, I'm advised it's only Social Work we should have been withdrawn. Okay, agree to do that? Well, that's the advice I've had, is it's only Social Work. Okay, Councillor Scobie, get to present your motion.
Thanks, Chair, for taking the motion as you described. I think it was 2 working days as I was out of kilter with putting it forward. However, just on the report that we have before us, under 3.1, there are nursing beds in Stranraer, but these are limited. I have before me the summary of bed information, Wigtonshire locality, dated 5th of February 2020. And clearly, in the 2 homes, Belmont House and Thornycroft, this is a residential home with 29 plus 1 respite in Belmont, and Thornycroft has 30 residential and 30 EMI beds, but none are classified as nursing beds. So I would question that, and this is me quoting from the document that we got as an area committee when we had a briefing session. So when you look at the first paragraph of my email, the notice of motion, that is that we are I hope we would recognise anyway that this is a fact, that Stranraer is the second largest town in the region, with only 2 residential homes to meet the needs of the ageing population, with no nursing home care provision and insufficient number of EMI beds. Indeed, I understand from discussions at IGB level, then they are considering a further 8 EMI beds sometime in the summer. So there is a recognition for this particular point. But again, there is no nursing home as the second largest town in the region. It's not the first time I've raised this in this chamber. I've raised it at full council meetings when we had reports made by the IGB Chief Executive Officer. I've raised it at their annual presentation of their annual report that we have a particular acute problem. Each time I have raised the issue and each time that a report has been made to whatever committee of the council, full council, they recognise the problem but never come up with a solution. So what the reason for my motion is to try and find a solution for the problem, because the consequences are outlined in the second paragraph of my motion, where people have been and are continuing to be pushed further and further away from their families and loved ones. And anyone that knows about dementia or has been associated with dementia, they know that in outcomes 1 and 2 of the Scottish Government's guidelines, then the purpose is to keep the person with dementia at home for as long as possible, or in a homely setting, or as close to home as possible. The IGB or the Health and Social Care Partnership have a policy of keeping the family within a 30 mile. Now that's recognised and understood by the Cabinet Secretary and have replied to me, but we find that with no nursing homes, more and more people have been and will be placed further afield from the 30 mile policy that exists. So what we're asking in the motion is that the council, and I've had this discussion with the chief executive, that we look for an immediate solution to this. If we cannot provide a nursing home in the immediate future, then what I would say is that the NHS has a responsibility under its health care to provide the out hours that is required, and in the home in question they have considered taking people that do need that nursing care, but they would look to the NHS to provide the office hours plus the out hours service that the person or persons may require. And that's why my motion is asking that we take immediate effect to try and resolve what has been a continual problem for I don't know how long, that we just keep talking about the problem but not coming up with a solution. The motion is looking for the solution, and that is the second largest town in Stranraer, that we get the proper provision under health and social care that the people deserve and are entitled to.
Thank you. Councillor Sloan.
Yeah, happy second, Chair. I'm just briefly say that all the professionals involved, or that should be involved, in the delivery of this service in Stranraer agree that it is needed, but it is a resource issue. We should be ashamed of ourselves. Now, the weakest people in our community who can't speak up for themselves, we withdraw a service from. Happy second, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Chair. I was just really looking for some clarity on actually information. I wasn't able to attend the discharge meeting that was organised locally in Wigtonshire with the localities manager, but I have actually managed to have a catch up with her since then. So while I was not at the meeting, there was a discussion about local and national guidance. And can I just have clarity of what the national guidance is? Because my understanding is our local guidance, which is guidance, differs from the national guidance. And so just clarity on what that is, but also if you had any information as to what other local authorities' guidance is. So, for example, Highlands and Islands, or even Argyll and Bute, which is, another rural area, what their local guidance is on this issue. Because, it would be really important to have the actual details on that.
Yes, I can clarify that the issue about the national guidance. You're absolutely right, it is guidance as opposed to being policy, and therefore the local guidance is based on the national guidance that we have. My understanding would be, though although I'd have to check the detail with some of the other rural authorities, is that most authorities follow that national guidance as far as possible, and actually we have sort of tried to extend that as far as we can. And the 30-mile radius is about us saying we actually want to make sure that there is a reasonable travel distance. We absolutely accept the argument that actually where possible you place people as close to home. That's always the starting point, but sometimes that isn't possible either because of the provision itself or because of the needs of the particular person. And therefore we've introduced the whole idea of the 30-mile radius in that we feel that we would not want to go beyond that where we possibly can. So it gives staff a guidance really, just to sort of say, try and look at whether you can keep that within. That's quite difficult when, from a Wigtonshire perspective, because of the limited resources, but we would always start from that perspective. But I can certainly get the detail on the other rural authorities for you.
Chair, if I could just to clarify, so putting the local guidance to one side, does the national guidance state that we should have that 30-mile radius? Is that within the national guidelines?
The national guidance talks very clearly about needing to place people as close to home as possible. It doesn't, as far as I'm aware, and I'm happy to go back and recheck it, but the information I've been given is that it doesn't specify the 30 miles, but it does say very clearly we would always seek to accommodate a choice which is as close to home as possible.
Councillor Scobie?
Yeah, Chair, I referred to earlier, I'm reading from letter from the Cabinet Secretary for Health when she was responding to communication that I raised with her. And in the paragraph, I understand that Dumfries, and I'm quoting, I understand that Dumfries and Galloway have a local policy. No, it says here that have a local policy not to move an individual beyond the 30-mile radius. Now that's from the Cabinet Secretary for Health. So she clearly understands there's a policy, and as Heather says, it's difficult with the liquor resources that Tommy has mentioned, and we're dealing with the most vulnerable and people who can't speak up for themselves here. And in terms of the national outcomes 1 and 2 on dementia, then I can also inform the Council today that one of the MSPs, Colin Smythe, is raising this very issue, that the guidance does not clarify the actual distance. So we may have clarification in the near future, which I hope we will, because as close to home, what does that actually say? And at least we've moved further by setting the 30-mile radius as a policy, but we're not adhering to it because of the lack of resources. As Heather again recognises, and as the second, I'll come back to the second largest town in the region, then it's shameful that we don't have it, and we're pushing, displacing people with dementia, which clearly is not in their best interest, further and further away from their families, their loved ones, and everything else. And we surely cannot accept that as being acceptable.
Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. I fully understand the reason for this notice of motion, but I'm a wee bit concerned about the terms used in it. With no nursing home care provision. Nursing care and home care are two completely different things. And I know the elderly medical infirm beds have to be supervised under proper qualified medical personnel. But the fact that you're joining up nursing provision and home care provision, I really think it makes it a difficult notice of motion to fully understand what it is you're after.
Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. It's just, this is specific to Stranraer, but is there other areas, some of the remoter areas of Dumfries and Galloway, where we should actually maybe ask Councillor Scobie and Councillor Sloan if they'd be willing to write in terms of across the region rather than specific to Stranraer, but maybe highlighting Stranraer because they did bring it, but you know, Langham, etc., or up to Carsfairn or Sanker or some of Dromore maybe, although it's in the Wigtonshire area. These areas, you know, 30 miles to there is a different situation than 30 miles from Dumfries, you know. So is there any way we could maybe broaden the
I think you're certainly correct. There is a problem in the east of the region as well.
I think to help members that if you look at the paper, that there are two specific issues. That there is a clear understanding when we put together an initial strategic plan that if we'd thrown the assets up in the air when they landed, they're not in the places we'd want them to be at that point. I think the opportunity, perhaps, Councillor Hislop, would come when the Council's asked to reconsider the strategic plan, which is currently up for where the policies that underlie it, such as the 30 miles, could be considered in the whole. I would agree that there are emerging issues in the east. However, work has been underway for a number of years, which Councillor Scobie and Councillor Sloan know, on the Wigtonshire report they've been waiting for. And I think what the notice of motion is trying to identify, there's an opportunity for the Council to express a view as to how quickly that can get taken forward, because the results of that from the IGB will come back to this Council for any asset. I think perhaps what I would recommend the Council is perhaps the motion, that report needs to identify what the need is in the West and how it will be met moving forward. I think that perhaps to formally raise with the Integrated Joint Board, I think that's the issue that this Council will then have to deal with, is the paper going to recognise clearly, because nobody in this room's seen it, what the need, an unmet need, is moving forward in the West and how that could be met, because a report will come to the IGB in the next cycle. So I think perhaps not to advise members about the motion, but perhaps that's the issue that members need clarity on. Is that report going to the IGB, going to clearly set that out, because that will then come back to this council and how we would address it. So perhaps it's the strategic plan's the route for the wider issue of our strategic direction, but for this notice of motion is about a report that is due to come forward to the IGB.
Well, there was actually a report to the Clinical Care Governance Committee, to the IGB Clinical and Care Governance Committee, but it did not address this issue, which was a disappointment to me, because I'd actually asked for it to be brought forward. And I think that is actually part of the issue. I didn't feel that they were giving adequate attention to. There seemed to be a suggestion that actually wasn't a problem, and I don't think that is the case. But there is obviously a wider problem across the region as well. Councillor Maitland.
Well, all I was going to add to this is that we've got very little information really in front of us as such, which I think you've alluded to, Leader. The Council Internal Auditor and the IJB Internal Auditor are embarking on a piece of joint work about delayed discharge, which will, I think, inform what is actually happening. My feeling in this instance is that I don't think we've got quite enough information to make a definitive decision about, but it's quite obvious, as the Chief Executive says, that we will have a bite at this through the strategic plan when we will have information in front of us. And I think we should probably wait for the information that's coming through the Witchenshire Transformation Programme. The fact that currently, my understanding, the last time that I looked at a snapshot was that there were 2 people in Witchenshire delayed discharge. 2. I was astonished at how low it was. It's changed. That we wait for that to come forward before we actually say to anybody, this must happen. We must commission a nursing home or whatever is being required. So I'm happy to wait for the information to come through, because the level of demand at the moment and the level of need seems to me not to be commensurate with Councillor Scobie's worries. Individual cases are, of course, anxious-making. I understand that, quite clear about that, but we have to also consider the other things which need to be done.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, thanks, Leader. Firstly, I mean, I know both Willie and Tommy are aware that this issue is known by the IGB and the Health Social Care Partnership. That's a given. Personally, I think this motion is timely. And I'm welcoming the fact that Willie's brought it here today. But very recently, the whole IGB process has started engaging with all the stakeholders to refresh the strategic plan, which is from, the Chief alluded to, 22 onwards, and to examine the strategic commission intentions that are allied and instrumental in shaping any changes to the current plan. So I think, well, I've got very personal experience of this as well, you know, and the huge sympathy, just even moving from town to town, the different accents have a major effect on people with dementia because they don't get it. So there's an empathy there with the motives behind the motion. But what I'm going to suggest here is the process is currently underway, it's started, to refresh the strategic plan and the strategic commissioning intentions. And I think that this issue, right, and along with anything else actually that this council actually sees fit to propose, should form part of that, should be part of that process. And I think that's what Gavin was aiming at in his comments earlier. So I think there's a way forward for this, and we can take that on board and deal with it quite easily.
Just Councillor Scobie and Councillor Sloan, would you be content with that as the way forward to engage with the strategic planning process?
Chair, if it was not such an acute problem west of the region, I recognise what Ivor's saying in terms of it's not just the west or Stranraer, but it's across the region that has a particular problem. Gavin touches on a point to identify the unmet need, and there is clearly an unmet need in Stranraer, and it's really to what Andy's saying here, you know, and waiting for a further report and then the strategic plan and everything else, there'd be nothing wrong if there wasn't an acute problem. But there is an acute problem that's been identified at each and every occasion that we've had reports brought before us, that there is this problem, and it's when that problem is going to be addressed. Now, in the absence of the strategic plan coming before us, and then we put in what we recognise as an unmet need, then what I'm saying is that there should be discussion under the Health and Social Care Partnership with the council involved, that the NHS has responsibility for providing if that care is not currently there, and that could be in nursing care. So to address the issue raised there, the wording may not be to people's like, but to clarify, there is nursing homes, and they are identified throughout the region. In Wigtonshire, there is only one with limited beds, and that's why there is a particular problem in Stranraer. But it's the lack of there is no nursing home in Stranraer.
Councillor Surtees? Okay, do you want to come back? Yeah.
Okay, I totally get where Wally's coming from in this, but we can't issue, the IGB can't issue a direction without having evidence. So it takes the report for the evidence before they can issue a direction, right? So, whilst it's frustrating, I know exactly where you come from, Willie, but we need to have a positive way forward and an evidence base rather than an anecdotal base. I don't disbelieve what Willie's saying, but we need to see it in black and white exactly what the needs are, what type of setting they need. I'm thinking here, we would really benefit, I would suggest here, for the members to get a briefing on all the different types of care and what they mean and what they're supposed to get. And just one last thing, the council is in the Health and Social Care Partnership. We don't have to go into it because we're there, we're an integral part of it. Sorry, thanks for giving way, Rose.
Okay, Councillor Surtees.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a really important topic for discussion, and I would welcome some information about what other local authorities do. And I think Councillor Hagman's point was very helpful, and also Councillor Hislop talking about the fact that it's not just in our part of the region, it's across the region. My points are also regarding younger people that might need nursing care, the impact on the family when younger people can get dementia as well. And, you know, we mustn't forget that when we talk about EMI and that there are younger people involved. I also wonder about the fact that our residential homes, and I know Heather will help me with this, they cope with a high, what we call high tariff level of care. And I know that residential homes are coping with a really high level of care that we could argue should be nursing. And I'd like to see a bit more information about who we've got in the residential care homes, and is it a suitable setting. But that could set a hair running about, so what do we do? I do understand that there are processes in place, but I respect the fact that we need to have timelines. So if we are going to look at what Councillor Ferguson is saying, can we please have a timeline? I think that is really crucial, that if we support this motion, or if we expand the motion at all, that we have a very set timelines for it.
Heather, did you want to add anything on the point that Councillor Surtees made?
Yes, I think there's a whole context here that probably would be really helpful for elected members to have a fuller briefing on, because if you just look at the whole issue of nursing homes out of context, then there are also issues about why we're struggling around nursing beds, what that's about. It's not simply about the lack of provision, it's about the lack of actually nurses and availability of people who will work in that environment. You know, so it's a multifaceted issue, and also the other bit that probably be quite useful for you to be briefed on, but you will get some of this through the Transforming Wigtonshire report, will be the bit about what are we doing to try and address some of these issues, because there's a lot of work going on around looking at how can we get nursing provision into homes when it's required, and that does happen, but it doesn't necessarily then mean it's classed as a nursing bed, but we are looking at inreach into care homes in order to make sure that there is sufficient nursing availability. But even that, that's quite difficult to do. But I know that, part and parcel of some of the proposals that I hope would come forward would be the bit about how do we go beyond what are our classic and accepted ways of caring for people at this stage in their life, and what else can we provide either within that setting and by expanding that to include other services, or indeed by other models of care. And I think there should be quite a lot of information that should be able to come through, either as part of the Transforming Wigtonshire report or possibly as a separate briefing if need be, that actually perhaps explains that in a bit more detail. The difficulty with it is, of course, this is about work in progress. This is a very complex area, which is why, and I absolutely understand the frustration about the immediate need, but this is about, in order to get this right and change and develop the models of care, you have to look at all of those different bits. So it is about seeing that whole context to it, really.
Councillor Sloan?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'd just like to make the point very briefly that just because there's no identified need elsewhere, or that there is an identified need in Stranraer, that's not a reason for not starting it in Stranraer, because there may be a need elsewhere. We've got an opportunity now to address this problem and let the Stranraer people know that they matter as well within Dumfries and Galloway.
Okay. Any further? I'm slightly confused as to how best to take this forward. There was obviously a desire to take it forward, but Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Leader. I've listened to what's been said so far, and it would seem that there's a report obviously to come back through the proper channels which will enable an evidence-based recommendation to the IJB to then set a direction to actually get something done in an appropriate evidence-based way, and that seems proper. And I think obviously we want to play our role in that to sort of support the best outcome for our residents where possible. But to be honest, I think what the notice of motion is asking this council to do in the last paragraph there is actually very weak. And I don't think it's actually sufficient for us to really agree, based on the evidence we've got in front of us, to really take it forward on that basis. I'd rather see something come back proactively to members that explains and outlines what's coming back from the transformation work and what the IJB is getting to look at and where that's going. Because if all this motion is asking us to do, and this is what's in front of us, is to formally raise with the Integrated Joint Board the need to recognise the situation. I would hope that IJB recognise the situation as it is based on the facts in front of them. And then we're also being asked to consider how the Health and Social Care Partnership will address the issue. I think it sounds like they're in the middle of kind of doing that process. So is this redundant? And if not, then it seems kind of more of a gesture than anything that's going to bring forward any effect. That's my concern about the time this is taking, because it seems like the work's already being done. I'd rather see something come back that's evidence-based for all members to look at, that we can take forward competently and properly.
Councillor Scobie?
Yes, Chair, taking on board what people have said, what councillors have said, and maybe it isn't strong enough, as Stephen has said. So, just to add and recognising that there is a report to come forward from Transforming Wigtonshire, that maybe a further word and from issues identified, and bring forward a report as a matter of urgency, because it ties into timelines and everything else. That we need some kind of indication how long that once the problem has been identified, there's evidence to back that up, that we know what the timeline is in addressing the issue, rather than having it each time hearing about the problem without the solution. So maybe, I would say that I'm happy to get the report, but have that report as a matter of urgency.
Can I just perhaps then see if I can help members? That I believe there's two items here. One is about giving members the timeline on how and what will come back from the Transforming Wigtonshire from the IGB as a matter of urgency. Also, a briefing before that, so members can perhaps get a better understanding of the wider implications, so that actually, because I think without that, it'll be quite difficult to understand aspects of the Transforming Wigtonshire. And the second issue is perhaps picking up on Councillor Hislop's point, perhaps about a report coming back setting out how members, the timeline, how members will be involved in the strategic planning process, and also a chance for members to set what information they would like to see coming before them as part of that process, so that we deal with the two can be separated out, because I think they're equally important, because I think members need to be informing the IGB of what information they would like to see coming forward as part of the strategic plan consultation, not just receiving it as I think as we have in the past. But I think for around this, we know the Transforming Wigtonshire paper is coming. I think if we could then bring a report back setting out the timelines, information in advance of that, a briefing for members so they fully understand the wider implications, so that members are able to go into the consideration of that report.
Councillor Ferguson?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's within my gift or not, but I'm going to say it anyway. If I was to recommend, for example, and I'd be wearing another hat, that the Transformed Wigtonshire report, before it goes to the IGB, actually goes to the two bodies, the two partner organisations, and then it goes to the IGB. So then the two bodies would be then agreeing the course of action. It might take an extra few weeks, right? But I think that would be a sensible step to make sure that the two bodies are happy with what we're going to be using as a template. And remember, it's a template that's been shown to work in Wigtonshire. It might not necessarily work in Annandale and Eskdale. So there might have to be tweaks along as it's rolled out across the region. So just a wee word of caution, it's not the panacea for all ills, the Transform Wigtonshire programme. Hugely helpful though it is.
No, I think that's a good suggestion. I think we should see it before it goes to the IGB. Yeah. Councillor Dempsey?
Just very briefly, Chair, I think it's a great idea, and I think we should, as Ivor Hislop said, we should get a picture of what's happening across the region. I think that would be useful. I think the other thing that might help is if we outlined in the report where our responsibilities lie, because most of us is devolved to the IGB, and we are a partner, a consultee, whatever you want to call it, but whatever our direct responsibility is should be featured in that report as well.
Are you content with that as the way forward?
Yeah, Chair, we'll do, as long as we get it through as a matter of urgency, so that we're starting to look at the whole issue. And it's around, it's not just, delayed discharge is one issue, where, we hear of them always on the increase, but it's also people at home who can't get into, so it's not just one facet of this, it's across the board, and it's to recognise that there is a policy and outcomes 1 and 2, so as long as it's framed in those contexts.
Councillor Ferguson?
Right, okay, Willie's right. Okay, there's absolutely no argument with his last comment there. Heather, whoever brings forward the briefing of how we're going to take this forward, can we also include, I think, is it the day of the hospital or something, that where we take a snapshot of people who are in different settings, right? And whether they should be in that setting or if it's an appropriate setting for them or not, because that impacts on the availability of, I'm not using EMI beds that Willie is, I'm trying to be, was it dementia friendly beds are called now, as opposed, but it includes everybody. So it takes dedicated nurses away, for example, looking after people who shouldn't be there but should be somewhere else. So it's a huge multifaceted picture, as Heather was suggesting there. And I think we need to incorporate the whole thing.
Okay, I think we've agreed a way forward, so thanks for that, and I'll close the meeting now. See you in March.